Hi there, George here to make a glass marble here. Today, I'm going to make a swirl marble with enamel powder, two kinds of Aventurine. I'm going to use a transparent glass for the core. Then I'm going to shape the core into a specific kind of cylinder with some flat portions on it. I'll decorate each of those flat portions, which I'll call a panel. Some with enamel powder to make them opaque, and some will remain clear so you can look through the marble. Then, once I do that decoration, I'm going to coat the marble in clear with a few choice stripes of colored transparent glass for a little interesting median stripe. So it'll be the core, some decoration, some color stripes, and then clear over top. And I generally just refer to these as an enamel because enamel is the basis of the design. And I love enamel because of its soft characteristics, rather than just a line of color or a line of clear and a line of or two colors next to each other with a hard line separating them. The enamel has a slight bleed into the surrounding areas, and it has a very interesting surface look, and I love it. So let's turn on some fire. Going. All right, we can see the torch. That looks good. Got my glasses on. I got this filter that I'm looking through is the same filter that's on the camera that I'm using today. So you are going to see things just how I see them, except for at a different angle. And we're just doing the one camera angle today. So I'm going to start off making the core. And I'm going to melt these ends together, and I'm going to start smooshing them together in a specific way so that the gather starts getting bigger and bigger. Let's do it. I'm wiggling these rods in and out of the flame, called flashing, to bring the rods up to temperature so that they don't just explode. Since they're narrow rods, shouldn't have to do it too long, and there we go. They're glowing on the ends, which means I can start really heating them. Look at that. Looks cool. That's like one of the most amazing colors when you have blue, something blue that's turning orange hot. Just like it's magical. Well, I'm a sucker for glass, as you may know. So, I've heated those rod ends and pushed them together. Now, I'm turning them, and then every once in a while, I'm going to let them roll over each other a little bit, and you can see how the rods joined a little bit. I did that sloppily because I don't want to do it quickly and trap air, and I don't want to do it quite that big. So I'm going to do it a little bit smaller regularly, just like that. Catch the end and pull it straight again. And that way I'm building the gather. It's all staying hot, but not too hot, and I'm not trapping a lot of air. That first thing where I really bent it, it just folded over and trapped some big air bubbles, which some people like, and I've got nothing against air bubbles in the glass. I just like them to be where I put them rather than where they end up. So you can go and grab those out, bubbles. If they're close to the surface, you can heat them and they'll pop out. That's like probably the worst way to do it for making your glass fuzzy, or just causing other problems with your design, like becoming blurry. I'd much rather get in there at a slightly lower temperature and pick them up for clarity of the glass's sake. Now, what I'm doing, the center gather, I want it to be about 3/4 to 7/8 of an inch, 20 millimeters. 22. Doesn't really matter. most of my marbles are one-off, so I'm making them one at a time. The size can be what the size ends up being, and that's fine. If you want marbles to end up being a certain size, you can measure the things you put them in as you put them in, which can be done for some designs, but most designs you can't do that. So the better way to do it is to leave yourself some margin for error at the end of your design, so that you've overshot it, so the marble's bigger than you need it to be, and then you remove some material to bring it down to the size you like. So this is a hot gather, and I'm just going to shape it into a cylinder. It's going to be the core of my marble, and I've shaped it. It's not perfect yet. Let's put it back in the heat. I want it to be a cylinder. I want it to be flat on both ends. I want it to be approximately 1 inch long. So I want a lot. Can't do it all at once. I got closer the first time. Let's get a little closer this time. You can have a lot of demands of your glass. Sometimes you can get there all at once. Sometimes it takes a few tries. For this case, I'm pretty close. I'm going to give it one more little shape, and I'm going to switch this glass rod off to a metal handle that I'm going to attach on the other side. Then I'm going to take the cylinder and start shaping it into the shape that will be conducive to the designs I want to put on it. And in this case, it's going to be a cylindrical square. There are some designs where I do a cylindrical hexagon or a cylindrical octagon. In this case, it's just going to be a square because it's a smaller marble. And there's a great amount of room for 4 panels of detail in this size of panel. So I've got a little bit of extra from the rod that's sticking out of my cylinder that I've made. Let's heat it all up and push this in, and I'll start shaping the cylinder into a cylindrical square. From there, I'm going to start picking up some enamel powder. I'll show you that in a minute. Enamel powder is finely crushed glass with a lot of pigment in it. So a thin layer coated on your glass colors it pretty densely and very thinly. So you're not adding mass. There's other designs where I'll do thin swipes of color over the surface to add coloration to the design, but that adds mass to the design. So my cylinder is looking good. It's wobbling a little bit because it's hot. See that? And I'm going to shape it into a square. Then after I shape it into a square, I'm going to pick up my tin of enamel powder and show you that in the magnifying glass. So this is cooling down a little bit so it holds its shape. So here's my enamel powder. White, powdery substance. Looks like powdered sugar. And then here's my square cylinder aqua glass. Okay, I'm going to put this back down, reach it way around. Gotta get in some of those good poses, so it might look good on a thumbnail for the video. Alright, so we're square now. I'm going to heat up one panel, this one. See how that one's orange, the rest of it's cooler. Let's do that again. I'm going to pick up some enamel powder. I'm going to press it in there a couple times, like 6 or 7 times. And look, I picked up nice layer. Probably the equivalent of 3 or 4 layers thick. Still a little thin, but that's good. I want the color to show through. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing cover. It can be a hint, suggestion. Still see my aqua. Isn't that cool? So, I mean, you could stop here, and this thing is pretty neat. But I got a lot more plans for this. Alright, so I straightened it back out. Swap it around. So there's my cylinder, which has been turned into a square cylinder, which now on 2 of the panels has enamel powder. Now on the white panels, I'm going to pick up some blue Aventurine, like that. And on the one of the clear panels and one of the other white enamel panels, I'm going to pick up some copper Aventurine. So I'm going to put copper Aventurine there. Alright, blue Aventurine there. That one's clear. And that one's Aventurine. I missed a little bit on this clear panel. Let's see if I can even it out. I did it. A little bit crookedy now. Let's melt that Aventurine frit in, and we'll get it to straighten back out. And then I'm going to heat the whole. Let's see, I straightened it out by twirling it, controlling the heat. Now I want the whole thing to start to heat up, and we'll roll it back into a cylinder and start adding the clear and the transparent color stripes. So now it's starting to get orange, and I can see from my point of view the corners are hot, but the core is still not quite up to the same temperature. And that's alright, because I'm just going to be gently reshaping the outside. So I'm going to roll it with this and a marble plate that you can't see, that's all screen on my table. And then I'll keep this end flat as I go. So I'm just going to round off the corners a little bit, and then I'm going to roll it and squish it a little bit flatter. And we're back to a cylinder, or darn close. So flat on the end. Let's get back in the flame here. Now, I want to put the emerald transparent stripe in the middle of one of the panels of white enamel. Let's do that first, and then I'm going to do cobalt on the opposite side. I'm going to coat the whole thing in clear glass. So, this I'm keeping warm. This I'm getting a hot gather on, and I'm going to do a swipe gather, which means I'm going to take this teardrop that I'm having, I'm going to touch it, move it down the side, and then use the heat to separate it, leaving a stripe of the color that I want. Let's do it again with cobalt. So that stripe isn't perfectly even in width, but it is pretty even as far as volume from side to side. And you could go for both. If I start with a bigger gather, touch more lightly, and push in as I go, I could get a more even gather. So here you see it was hot when I put it on, and it was starting to get cooler. I was running out of glass as I got towards this end. So that's why it's sort of narrowed down. Let's try what I was talking about and get a slightly bigger gather. And we'll touch it more lightly. Drag it down. Not a heck of a lot better, a little better. When it's in the clear, overcoat. It's going to look very nice. It's glass. It's going to look nice. But will it look how you envisioned it? That is the thing that I'm always looking for. Start off just squishing things around, having fun, moving the colors, maybe getting it round, getting it bead shaped, getting the ends to look nice, getting the whole thing to be smooth. You know, and the design you work on as you make more and more. And that's any glass. Stained glass, hot glass, kiln glass, warm glass, all that. Alright, so I'm going to get a medium glass rod. Yeah, a medium clear rod and start to flash that. And so there, I've heated that. Let's look at the magnifying glass. Heated that transparent cobalt, that transparent emerald onto my cylinder. Just getting it down again. Keeping it warm, rather. It's always hot. You can't touch any of this stuff. It'll burn you like crazy. It like turn your skin into like a little fine layer of gray ash as it touches your skin. So painful. Alright, I'm just going to clean up the end of this rod. There. Trying to hold both things in one hand for a second so I can grab my tool. You could also set these things down for a second. This glass is pretty sensitive to thermal shocking. I'm using Moretti, which is a lead crystal glass, referred to as a soft glass. It's a coefficient of expansion 104, which is among the more temperamental but beautifully colored brands of glass. So you really have to maintain a working temperature once you get it up to temperature. And then you don't have a lot of time to get it into your annealing oven afterwards. Alright, so I'm getting a kind of a floopy gather on the end of my medium clear rod here, and I'm going to start doing some swipe gathers of the clear to cover over my core and the transparent glass that I put on there. So I just did the enamel and one side of the cobalt. I'm going to work my way around. Probably be about 8 swipes as we go. Better to wait an extra second until your gather is ready to go rather than trying to rush the swipe onto the marble. So you have a little extra glass to work with on the end rather than having it catch and freeze on your core, ruin your design. Because I want the gather to slide along my design work without moving it. So it's just hot sliding over the surface, leaving a trail of itself on there. So it's looking really nice already. The shape's getting a little off, but we're not worried about that. Keeping the temperature right. I'll fix the shape kind of as I go and kind of as I have time and kind of as opportunity presents itself. I'm almost done with these swipe gathers. Then I'll fix the shape a little bit. Sort of let the flame and spinning and gravity, surface tension do the work for me for a little bit. As I start to focus on the unattached end, I'm going to start getting those stripes of color and enamel panels to come to a point on the end. So I found you can get all those design points to come together at once at the end. When you're doing things on a larger scale, it's much easier. On a smaller scale, you really, it's easy to pull through your color and your design by overextending the color by trying to do all the movement at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the design in the middle layers along towards the outside by pushing on the clear color that's over top of it. So pushing on the clear color, bring it over slightly. And it's going to bring the enamel and the aventurine and those clear stripes. When the metal gets too hot, I have to quench it, or it will start pulling glass off as it sticks to the metal. If the metal's cold, it won't stick. If the metal's hot, it will. Which is great and irritating and great in that order. So I've pulled that clear over the end in this case. And then you can look at the end and see the design. It's starting to come together a little bit. Now that I've got it halfway there, I use my glass blowing jacks, in this case a pair of narrow scissors. And you know, I'm not going to do that yet. What I'm going to do is I want to put the twist in the marble first. So heat up my other handle. I'm going to put it into the area that I'm going to pull off later, just that little clear area that I've dragged over. Then I'm going to heat my existing handle, stainless steel bunty rod. Pull that out. I'm going to repeat the process I did on the first side on this side. These are some pretty nice complementary colors together. This sort of tealish aqua core, the white enamel powder, the sparkly aventurine of blue and regular copper, and the emerald clear and the cobalt clear. Really looking good together. So I get a couple little holes on that clear to pull the design underneath, and I'm going to reheat it again. You can see the end, it's starting to come together. Hard to see if that is visible. So like I said, I have these filters on to protect my eyes, and I have a filter on the camera lens so you can see something similar to me, but then to see what I'm seeing on the screen, it's like going through two layers, so I can't quite tell when something's hot, if you can see the detail behind that. I think you can see it starting right now as it cools down. But let's get a handle back on there. We're going to take the middle portion of the marble and give it a twist. As you can see, it's straight now. And the classic design of a marble, spiral. So that's what we're going to do. So if this was a glass blowing style, to get a colored core like that, you'd get a gather of clear, you'd color that core, all while it was attached to one rod. You'd decorate your medium layer, your middle layer, with the enamel powder and your aventurine, and then dip it in the furnace again for clear. because the furnace glass comes out and it's pretty soupy, just the spinning that you're normally doing, trying to keep the glass from falling, will impart that spiral to the glass. It's hard to not put spiral in when you're dealing with glass that's that hot. Well, I guess it depends. Alright, so I'm putting the spiral in. I'm trying to put it in evenly. It's going in pretty even. But I'm going back and forth and turning it so that the marble heats evenly, so that when I'm putting in a little bit of spin, it's not turning too much on one side and the other side's not moving at all. It's all moving together. It's one big gathering place. I'm liking the amount of spin here, so I'm going to start heating this handle. I'm going to pull it off. And I'm going to clean up that little end. Remember, I started to get out my glass jacks, or in this case, for this scale, these scissors work great. And I'm going to make a cut line that's perpendicular to my axis of rotation. As I'm turning the marble and cutting into it. I'm going to first make a line, and then I'm going to start deepening that line and grabbing the glass and giving it a little bit of a twist as I pull it down to a point, and then that little piece on the end will pop off. I say pop off. I'm cutting it off, but I'm balancing my manipulation of the glass with its temperature as it cools, so that as it cools down to that little point, that little bit just comes. And now we can look at the end and see the design swirls come to a nice point together. Which is exactly what I wanted. Woo! So now I'm going to heat this side and let it smooth out. I'm going to use my marble mold, which is a hemisphere of graphite. I'll show you that. Different sizes. So I'll pick one that's bigger than the size of my marble and just put a little light pressure in there to get it to approach the shape of the sphere. I'm trying to get it spherical all at once. Especially since I have to do work on this end that's still attached to this metal handle. And some mass is going to come off of that. Not a lot. You saw the first one. It was just a little, this right here, little tiny blob. If I can make a matching size blob from the other side of this marble, I will remelt those flat in my kiln and make a pair of earrings. Because that's just about the right size. Well, I say that, I'm hopeful. A lot of times they just end up in a jar. And then local friends or Blue Mounds Art Club people will come and take them for their projects. That's also fun. Alright. I made that end a little more, spherical. Do it one more time. Then I'm going to switch off and do this end. Something's making a weird noise. Oh, I see. I moved that jar. Something's swinging and clacking into it. It's freaking me out. Alright, so that end looks pretty good. I'm going to attach, you can see all the way through, aqua. Heat up my handle here and reattach right at that little point where they all meet. Gently, I hope. So not to disturb it. There we go. Now I'm going to heat this one. Pull it out. So this is also one of the designs where I'm okay with frit. Normally, frit, I think, is kind of random. Better for bigger projects where you want to get a smattering of color in. The smaller stuff, I prefer more detail. And I think frit is it's a nice way when you're first starting out to get color in your projects, but I think it's got too much of a random element and will hold you back from making some more detailed designs and getting to the spot where you envision your design ending up being. But I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm telling you what I think about my stuff. Alright, so that little blob's about to come off. That one won't make an earring with the other one. It's much bigger. But we ended up getting that down to a nice point. I can get over here. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, look into my spiraling shape. Now we can get it into a sphere. See how it's kind of, you can still see the leftover of the cylinder shape. Now we're going to eliminate that. You can look through it and see the aqua core and the stripes around it. Just fun marble. Not a real, precise design. It's nice that there's like stuff going on in the panels. The panels are even from end to end. They come to nice points, but it's color. Looks cool. Looks like you'd want to play with it. It'll look good from both sides and on the ends. And my handle came off. Let's fix that. So the handle came off because I was probably using too much force, but also because the junction was getting cold. But now I'll heat it back up and make sure not to neglect it now. I was looking through some demos from a year ago and 2 years ago, trying to find a marble that I just haven't done in a long time. This is the clear core enamel. Not getting spherical, but not quite marble shaped yet. Well, I guess it's marble shaped. If this was the 19th century, this would have been considered good enough. They would have just cooked this off the pliers and bam, shoved it in a box. Didn't have to be super round. They're like, oh, kids are just going to play with these. They don't need to be super round. So these handmade marbles that they'd make in a couple of cities in Germany were like the source of glass marbles in the late 1800s, early 1900s. In America, there were a few companies making, mass-producing, when you say mass-producing, still small factories making clay marbles. There was a couple of factories doing glazed marbles, one in particular you probably have heard of. And then there was sort of a fancy painted clay marble company. But then these marbles, these glass marbles from Germany, were really big, all the way up to the mid-19 teens. And then there were some American companies that started making hand-gathered, machine-rounded marbles. There's kind of like a little craftsmanship going into the design work, but then a machine would finish rounding it off and kind of randomize the design a little bit. But they were beautiful. And then by the time the 1930s rolled around, they were those spiral auger things that you've probably seen movies of, that stream of glass comes down and goes little bits. By the time it gets to the end of the spiral auger, the marbles are round and cool. Now let's have a quiz on what we just talked about. Shout out your answer like a crazy person to the computer. Oh, who said it? You liar! You're wrong. You failed the quiz. Or you pass. I don't know. Can't hear you. But keep shouting, because that is definitely helping. Alright, we rounded that side quite a lot. Oh, you know what? Let's give it a little pass through the cherry wood marble molds. And those are basically a plank of wood and cut a handle in and drilled a series of holes in. The wood was wet, soaking for several months to a year before I ever even drilled it with the holes. And then it stays submerged in water forever. Ends up looking like this. This marble panel. And so, when I spin it in there, I just choosing a, can I see? There we go. Choosing one of the drilled holes and using just the rim of it for just a few seconds on each marble, or on each hole. And it smooths and chills the surface of the marble. And there's some other stuff going on there. I'll quiz you on that later. Now I'm going to use just a little glass rod. It's my final attachment point. And see, I have to fix this side of the sphere. And I'm just going to look where I detach that steel rod. Because very often, since that stainless steel is so hot, when it fuses into the marble, it sometimes like leaves metal particles, or leaves a little lightly boiled glass that's fuzzy looking. So I pulled out just a little bit. Now I'm heating that up. I'm going to reshape it in the graphite molds. First one's just gentle, not pushing really. I'm just letting the mold, gravity, do a little work for me. Get closer. You can see it's pretty spherical. Let's heat it up again. Get the ripples out of the surface. Yeah, these colors came out really nice. It's a pretty little marble. When a marble comes out good like that, it's just like, man, I want to sit around and make like 10 of those for a whole day, because I could just look at these colors. But what happens is, after you make the first couple, you're like, oh, let's do something else. Although there are certainly times, there it is, that's pretty nice, pretty spherical. I'm going to give it the last shape in the cherry wood marble molds. Yeah, so there's a lot of times when I'm making a similar marble a few times. I find that a useful exercise to for investigating also, and cementing techniques and ideas. And sometimes I'm just doing, you know, doing the marble to make like the most perfect one. And the other ones will be like, those are nice, but not that super awesome one that I wanted. Nice when those ones come out that they're just almost exactly how you like. It's rare. As you get pickier, let's try that cherry wood. Alright, this marble is done, except for getting it off the last rod. And so what I'm going to do is see the end, down to a point. I'm going to chill that last connection point with the scissors. I'm going to do it over an area with an insulated tile that has a divot in it to catch the marble. I'm going to actually set it in the divot, chill that last point, which is what I'm doing right now. And I'm going to tap it. The rod comes off. It's tapping the dust off my torch and the carbon dust. Then I'm going to heat that last little nub with a glass rod attached to the marble. And if you did it right, it's really small. And it polishes right out. I'm going to use a special tweezer that I just made out of some coat hanger. Bent a couple different ways. Good grabbage. I'm going to heat that up to the right temperature. I heated it past, so it's too hot, and now it's even and it's coming down in temperature, and now it's the temperature I want. I can pick up my marble. Show it to you. Some fun colors. And I'm going to put it in the annealer. Here, back. Punch my little tool. And that's it. That just gets to anneal for an hour or two, and then I'll gradually turn the temperature down, and I'll post a picture of that at some point before next week's demo. All right, have a great night. Bye-bye. Oh, let's bleed these lines. Oxygen high side and low side. Propane is low. It's all low side, so I'm just closing the valve, letting the lines bleed out, and closing the window valves. Now we're set.